Hi, everybody. I'm Vince Mickens. Welcome to All Things Aviation and Aerospace. This is a special edition, a Father's Day edition. I qualify, have three daughters, supposedly grown, but that's another conversation. And I have four fathers with me from different aspects of the industry, which makes it extra cool, and on all different uh, levels of fatherhood. I'll put it that way. And so that's a great thing, too. So looking forward to talking about their experiences as dads in the aviation and aerospace industries, and also what they see in terms of the future. And then we hope to inspire by talking about what all the things that are happening in the industry. The industry is robust right now. It's just really booming. And there's just a lot going on both the commercial, private aviation side, as well as the aerospace side. So I'm going to get this party started, and I'll start by introducing Pete Bunce. Pete is the president and CEO of GAMA, which stands for the General Aviation Manufacturers Association. Pete has quite a history in aviation, not only at GAMA, but 30 years in the Air Force. And we'll talk about all of that and what it was like raising kids as you move around and they're flying everywhere. Etc. So Pete, welcome to the show. Appreciate you having the time to come join us. We also have Dr. Pablo de Leon. Dr. de Leon is a professor and chair of the Department of Space Studies at the John D. Odegaard School of Aerospace Sciences, as well as the director of the Human Spaceflight Laboratory, which I'm dying to go see one day. All of this is at the University of North Dakota, up there in cold country, but lots of good stuff going on. Dr. De Leon, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. And then we have somebody that I've known since he started school, and he is now a structural design engineer for Boeing commercial planes in product development. Again, he's at Boeing, and his name is Omar Alexis Richards. I know him by Alexis, so they may call him Omar at Boeing, but I'm going to call him Alexis on this show. Alexis, welcome to the show.
Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. And Alexis is one of the newest dads of all of us by far. He has a 3-year-old and a baby. So he's just getting started. So he's probably going to be taking notes from you guys with regard to raising kids in this industry. And yet another Air Force officer to be proud of, we have Lieutenant Colonel Kenyatta Ruffin, commander of the 71st Operations Support Squadron at Vance Air Force Base in Enid, Oklahoma. And by the way, Lieutenant Colonel Ruffin, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Loco Lopez sends his regards. Awesome. Lieutenant Colonel Lopez is an F-22 Raptor pilot. He was a demo pilot, and now he is stationed in Honolulu. So, but welcome to the show again, guys. It's really great to have you all. It's a pleasure to have this opportunity. It's kind of a celebration of Father's Day. And I'm going to start out with a little anecdote in terms of Brigadier General Charles E. McGee. As everybody knows, or most know, he is 101 and a half, we like to say now, on his way to 102. And we all know about Tuskegee Airman McGee and the things that he's done. But there's always something new that pops up. So in a couple of weeks, they're going to name General Aviation Terminal after him. It'll be called the Brigadier General Charles E. McGee General Aviation Terminal at Charles B. Wheeler Downtown Airport in Kansas City, Missouri. So they're doing a special ceremony there, and a lot of the dignitaries are going to be there. And Textron's being kind enough to actually fly him out so he doesn't have to deal with commercial flight. And so it's really going to be an exciting event. And a well-deserving one for not only a well-deserving dad, but a living icon, legendary. I can't say enough about him. So really excited about seeing that happen. And it will be his first trip post-pandemic, so to speak. So anyhow, we have 4 different dads at 4 different levels. Now, here's an interesting fact that we were talking about just before going live. Lieutenant Colonel Kenyatta Ruffin and Colonel and CEO of GAMA, Pete Bunce, both have 6 kids. So I think Lieutenant Colonel Ruffin's a little on the earlier end of that, but nevertheless, he's got 6 kids that he's raising. And Pete Bunce, you've been raising kids for quite some time now, and I imagine most of them are, if not all of them, are grown like mine or calling themselves grown. So, and Dr. De Leon, you're right there somewhere in the middle with your daughter. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned earlier, Alexis is just getting started. So I'm going to hand it off to Pete first and let Pete tell us a little bit about what he does and about raising 6 kids.
Well, thanks, Vince. I mean, it's just a privilege to be with you today, and I'm excited for General McGee. You know, I've spent a lot of time there at the downtown airport in Kansas City, and this is just a very fitting honor for the general. Just during my career in the Air Force, moving around a lot, and Kenny and I were relating to that, just moving kids around and all of the different assignments. What I thought was interesting was the fact that the kids all thought that Santa Claus always arrived always at an Air Force base and always in an aircraft until they stopped believing. I mean, it was something that they expected each and every year. And it was real cool because, you know, we'd hide the airplane on the other side of the base and taxi a 2-seater up with Santa Claus in the back, and the kids would all get excited. But one thing that I had flown, you know, I don't even remember when my first airplane ride was, because my aunt, who didn't have any kids, operating an airport, she had 11 airplanes. And so it just was ingrained in me. But where I fail with my kids is that moving all around and exposing them to air show after air show, I didn't get them up in the air enough just in a general aviation airplane. And so it wasn't until they went to college and got a chance to go ride with other folks that they decided, Dad, why didn't you expose us to that? And I go, all you needed to do was ask. But I realized that I did not do my job correctly to expose them. I just thought it would happen naturally. And I think I could have done more. Now they're all excited and, you know, get a chance to fly, but they're all into their various careers. One of them works at Boeing, and so they're somewhat affiliated, but they all love aviation. But my advice to everyone is there's so many opportunities. And the other part of this industry, which I think is so spectacular, is the people that you meet in this industry.
Couldn't agree more.
They just support one another. I don't know where there's another industry, and I think it's just the ethos of aerospace that you're always trying to bring up the next person. You never find anybody that disagrees with helping young people get into this industry, and there's always people willing to help and mentor. And that's why the opportunities with what's happening now, it's probably got to be one of the most exciting times in aviation since right after World War II and the dawn of jet age. So whether it's space or electric aviation or anything else, it's just very, very exciting.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I was going to actually mention something, but then a question came up already. This is probably the earliest I've ever had a question pop, but it applies to what you were just saying, and that is that military generally has flying clubs. So were you involved in, and I'm asking this to you and Kenny, were you guys involved in your flying clubs during your career?
For me, it was just a time factor. There just was so little extra time available because of deployments and everything else. I didn't do it, and I wish I had.
Yeah. No, I hear you on that one. And I know from my Navy time that I had very little time to spend actually flying with a flying club. So I understand that. Pete, just to make you feel a little bit better, what I was going to say to you is that, so I've raised 3 daughters, and I used to put them in car seats in planes since they were infants. So they grew up in the aviation flying environment. And to this day, none of them have their ticket yet. However, my oldest has plans to get it, and the only advice I've given her is say, when you decide to pull that trigger and do that, do it all in one fell swoop. Don't stretch it out. I've seen so many people do that where they start flying, taking lessons, but they stretch it out. They end up paying a lot more, and it takes them a heck of a lot longer. My middle one is a backseater, and unless she surprises me, which she has been known to do, I'm not sure if she'll ever get her license, but I know she's always good for getting in the backseat if we're going somewhere by flying. And my young one's a natural stick. So I think after she's a sophomore in college now, so I think a rising junior, as they say. So I think after she finishes doing what she's doing career-wise, she may be like your kids, where later on she will add that to her accomplishments and that type of thing. So, Kenny, how about you? You've got what's the age range of your kids, and what's your perspective sharing with what Pete just talked about?
Absolutely. So I have twin 13-year-old daughters all the way down to a soon-to-be 2-year-old. So I've got the span everywhere in between. And what's kind of interesting about through our careers, I started off, we were in Japan when we first had our twin girls. And so by the time they were 2.5, they had crossed the Pacific Ocean 5 times, right? And so they were flyers. And actually one time, it's funny, when we were leaving, they were about 5. We're standing in line, TSA line somewhere, and there's a older lady in front of us who's, I have to do what? Take off my, right? Just kind of all confused. And my 5-year-olds are like stripping down and just like pros through it. And so it was kind of funny to realize, as we like to say, they're air kids. And so that was like kind of fun. But then as we got older and we were back in the States and started driving to our different assignments, in December of 2019, so just 2 years ago, I realized that my 3-year-old had never been in a plane. And I was like, your sisters have been over the Pacific Ocean 5 times by the time they're your age, and you have never been in a plane. And so what I did for my birthday was I took my youngest son flying. So that was fun.
Oh, that's neat. Kenny, you have, I think I heard you say that you have been relocated 7 times so far in your career, and the 8th time possibly coming up. One of the things that I talked with when I had the opportunity about a week ago to talk with Brigadier General Charles McGee about when his kids were growing up. And one of the things he talked about was how his wife was the stable factor in the household while he, was gallivanting in the air and doing what he did for our country. How about you? Because you fly, every time I text or talk to you or email you, you're either going to get in a plane or you just came back from flying, and you're an instructor. Plus, as I mentioned, you have moved 7 times throughout your career.
Yeah, that's actually just 7 times in the past 8 years. We've actually moved 12 times total in the 18-year career. And I started flying when I was 13, and I soloed when I was 14. And when I was 18, I had my FAA CFI, and I could teach anyone how to fly. I was a glider instructor, so I could teach anyone in America how to fly an airplane. But the only problem was they'd have to drive me to the airport because I didn't have my driver's license yet. And so as I've always been passionate about flying, it's having a wingman that's able to keep other parts of life, like figuring out what to wear, what to eat, having a wingman that's just definitely there. Brush your teeth. Oh yeah, I thought I just had to fly an airplane. So my wife Tanae is absolutely awesome, and we've enjoyed our career so far and are looking forward to it. And like I said, the kids told me that, hey, we enjoy being air kids, and so that's been a real joy for us.
How much do the kids understand about what you do as an Air Force pilot, et cetera, in terms of your responsibilities serving our country?
Yeah, I think more and more that's a really good question, a real good point. And one of the things I'm passionate about with creating the Legacy Flight Academy was just how do we inspire? How do we inform, influence, inspire? How do we know the legacy, live the legacy, and grow the legacy of what it means to serve our country, of the Tuskegee Airmen? And I think my kids fully understand. The 4-year-old not so much, but the 7-year-old and above, they're on board, and they understand some of the sacrifices, some of the long nights, some of the deployments or TDYs. And like I said, they've actually encouraged us to keep going sometimes, even when we thought about maybe we should get out.
Yeah. Is somebody trying to get you to go flying?
I know. I'm trying to stop it.
Pete, let me put the same question to you.
Which question was that?
Well, I'm sorry about kids, your kids, and how much of an appreciation they have or understanding they have of what you did in the Air Force.
Oh, I think they totally understood the importance. They're all extremely patriotic and understand, service to country and how important the United States military is. And then the oldest, my oldest son was wounded pretty severely in Iraq. So two of them have made their careers helping veterans and everything. So, they understood it in a very personal way.
Wow, that's outstanding. Let me shift a little bit to aerospace. I've had Dr. Pablo De Leon on the show before. He's at UND, as I mentioned earlier. And Dr. De Leon, you have a really interesting area that you teach and that you deal with, and that's in space studies, spacesuits and everything. So tell us a little bit about that, and then about your daughter. You have one daughter who I think you said no, you didn't tell me, but you're going to tell us if she's interested in aerospace.
Yes. Well, space has been a passion of mine since I was a kid myself. So all my life always was surrounded by things related to space, and somehow I kind of transmitted that to my family as well. So the funny thing with my daughter is that she grew up surrounded by spacesuits and rockets and stuff like that. Every vacation, I'll check just to see which was the closest NASA Space Center or Aerospace Museum. And there was, I was forcing that visit to that place, So, and I just here in my office, I found this picture that I will try to show here. She was a baby here, and she's inside one of our spacesuits, right? Of course, we're holding her, right? But so for her, a spacesuit or a rocket is something absolutely common. So when there is a birthday party or something like that, and she talks with her friends and say, okay, what your dad is doing, whatever. And some of her friends said, oh, my dad drives a truck or whatever. My daughter said, wow, really? Oh, that's super interesting. Because for her, working with spacesuits or, doing the kind of stuff that I do is completely common.
It's like going
normal.
to McDonald's.
Right. Yeah. So she said from the beginning she wanted to be a paleontologist, and to me it was kind of heart crushing. But I said, okay, you of course you do whatever you want. But lately, what's happening is that I see her more and more interested in aerospace. For example, I'm reading a book or I'm watching a documentary or doing something, and she comes and asks me about it. So from my side, no pressure, absolutely. You do whatever you want. But now I'm seeing that she, at 11, she's starting to develop an interest on these things. And the other thing that I usually did for years is model airplanes. I had my airplanes, I build them in the garage at home, and over the weekends, I'll take them to fly. So when she was very small, she wanted the radio to pilot the airplanes herself. So of course, you knew how that was going to end. So I gave her another radio with no batteries, so she could pilot the plane. So
to save your plane.
Right, exactly. So yeah, she has an interest in model airplane and drones now, but is getting there. Is getting there. Yeah.
So model rocketry, model airplanes, that brings up a really great thing, because I grew up with that and did that with my dad, even though his interest in aerospace and everything was more fascination than anything. He was a music teacher, but I grew up with that, and I think that's a great bonding thing, but I also think it's a great learning thing at a young age. Have any of you, besides Dr. De Leon, participated in modeling or rocket modeling? You know what I'm trying to say. Yeah, that.
We do it often, actually. That's one of our favorite things we do with our kids. And I grew up doing model rockets myself, and so we for the first time in my life, we launched a 2-stage rocket. So we got a booster and we launched a 2-stage rocket. And then one of the coolest things
was it an Apollo?
No, no, that one's way too complex and way too expensive. It was just, you put a little adapter, it's basically just the size of the engine. It falls off after like 300 feet.
Gotcha.
And so, but we have about a dozen rockets. We just went actually 2 or 3 weeks ago. But one of the coolest things we've had the opportunity to do, I'm fortunate enough to know retired Air Force Colonel Fred Gregory, who was the first Black space shuttle commander, and then went on to be the deputy administrator of NASA, another Air Force Academy grad. And my family and I called Dr. Gregory, and so Dr. Gregory got to just talk to my kids about being an astronaut for an hour on Zoom, just like this. Because like you, Dr. Leone, I've tried not to put the pressure on them, but as you can probably see there in the background and stuff, there the subliminal messages have started to be received a little bit, and it's definitely fun. And I encourage people to do model rocketry. It's a great, easy exposure that doesn't take any expertise to do. So have fun and go do that.
Yeah, that and radio controlled, both are a great thing to do. Pete, did you ever explore that?
Yeah, the things I did with those Estes model rockets, I don't even want my kids to know about, because they, one of the scariest things is you getting right to the top of the wire and then doing a 90-degree and diving for the ground and stuff like that. But yeah, I had a lot of.
I hear you loud and clear on that. I've melted a few parachutes between stages because I didn't set it up properly, and I did do a 2-stage, and the first stage was great. The second stage did a 90-degree. So I've been there and done that. I get that totally. But it is a fun thing to do with kids, and again, it's a great way to expose them to the industry at an early stage. I was going to, you know what? I'll go to you, Omar, and Alexis, and talk to you about being a young dad. And you've been in the industry for how many years now? And tell us a little bit about that first, working first at NASA, I believe for Boeing, and then eventually going to Seattle.
Yeah, so last week it's been 17 years now in the industry. I started my career off, as you mentioned, at the Kennedy Space Center, working on the space shuttle program as a structures engineer. Did that for about 8.5 years. And that was an amazing experience, just being close to, a historical piece of engineering. It's an amazing vehicle. And as it was mentioned, the people, you go for the airplanes or the spacecraft and you stay for the people. It was like a family. So that was a great program to be on. So the shuttle program ended, and then I said I need to find what's next, and that was mainly operations. So doing modifications on the space shuttle or doing repairs on it. So I said I need to get some design experience. I want to create. So I packed my bags and I came to the Pacific Northwest to work on commercial airplanes. And I got lucky. I landed in product development right away, which is where all the magic happens prior to an airplane being launched, being announced to the public. So that's where we make a lot of the configuration decisions and making a lot of those decisions that cast a long shadow. So materials, what type of performance the airplane is going to have. And so I landed in the 777-9, which is now in flight testing, did that. So it was cool to go from putting parts on a PowerPoint presentation to being able to see them get built as components and then being built as a complete airplane and seeing that airplane fly for the first time. It's a really cool experience, just being able to get that whole development cycle and being able to experience that. And so now that it's in flight testing, I'm back in product development. I'm working on some new things that will someday be announced, but that's what I do at Boeing.
And that's exciting for you, huh?
It is. It's very exciting.
I was saying that's exciting for you. Yeah. Yeah, with the experiences you had, particularly something as iconic as the space shuttle, and now with what you do in Seattle, what kind of advice do you have for the aspiring young that are wanting to get into aerospace?
networking, reach out to people who are in the industry, take advantage of internships if you can get them. Don't be discouraged if you can't land your dream job right away. I didn't have my dream job right away, but I got my foot in the door. I got into Boeing. And once I was in there, there was a whole universe of things that I could do. So don't be afraid.
Yeah, you're
don't be
breaking up
discouraged
a
by
little
that.
bit. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, your signal was going in and out a little bit, but I think we got you. Speaking of getting your foot in the door, how did you get your foot in the door at Boeing?
So there was a systems engineer job, and I didn't even know what that was. It was to do safety and reliability analysis on ground support equipment. I didn't know what that was, but nobody wanted that job, and I got it. And the manager knew that that's not something that somebody coming out of college wants to do. So he told me right away, you give me 2-3 good years and I'll get you to wherever you want to go. And so I did that, and I would always see the guys working on the vehicle. They were having so much more fun than I was. And I said, okay, I want to go over there. I want to work. I want to be in the shuttle. I want to touch it. I want to be on it. That's where I want to go. So I did 2.5 years, and he helped me out, like he said, and I got into the vehicle side, and that's where I've been ever since, working on vehicles.
So in essence, you also followed your passion, because once you discovered what your passion really was, you went after it full speed.
Yes.
Full throttle, as we'd like to say in the industry. So what area of Boeing does your wife work in? I'm going somewhere with this, obviously.
So she's on the 777 right now. She started her career out on the 787, and now she's moved on to the 777.
And you guys met at Boeing and got married, and now you have 2 kids. How's that transition been from becoming a father while continuing to progress in your careers?
It gets a little more complex, balancing work with the kids, but it's been fun.
Was it especially hard last year during the when we were in the middle of the pandemic?
It's still hard. We're working from home, and so the kids are here, and so we're trying to get work done and make sure they're not watching TV all day.
Yeah, exactly. I'm surprised your wife is doing a great job, I guess, or whoever is of containing them. I'm surprised there hasn't been a door opening and we see somebody running behind you. You probably been going, okay, is that going to happen during the show? Yeah. Dr. De Leon, when you first got it, you mentioned that you had a love for aviation and aerospace a long time. How did you go from, where did you start, and how did you end up at UND as a professor?
Well, I like many of the people with us today, I started flying very early in Argentina, my native country. So I started flying when I was 16. And in fact, I had to wait until getting my driver license, like Kenny just mentioned. I had a similar situation there. So I always have a love for aviation, and in particular for space, because I kind of grew up with the last flights of the Apollo missions. So I was really fascinated watching that from a farm in the middle of the country in Argentina, where the only technological advancement we used to do was to milk cows and repair agricultural vehicles. So, but I was always interested in technical stuff and space stuff. And then I became an engineer, and my intention was to come to the United States and study here and get a postgraduate degree. And I was working a few years at the Kennedy Space Center. I was working also, like Omar mentioned, with the space shuttle. I had the chance to help on putting experiments ready for the space shuttle and several missions, and be able to understand the level of complexity of an experiment to be certified to fly on a remarkable space vehicle, but a space vehicle that was very fragile as well. So the complexity of developing an experiment for a space shuttle is probably like any other space vehicle before, especially after the accident of the Challenger, and of course later the Columbia. So being able to work on something that will go to space was really like a dream come true. And then in 2004, I got the offer to come to the University of North Dakota and start working on this, and has been my passion since then. And then this is kind of connected to the title of your program today, which is that sometimes you don't only act as a father to your own kids, but also to the students, because it's something that in a teaching position, or if you're a trainer with training pilots or whatever, it's sometimes you have to give advice to students, not necessarily on the educational, but also on things that you see. They are here in a university, they are far from their parents, and when you see something, you can sometimes help them to make a correction path and get back to track. So sometimes you also have to act as a kind of a father figure with the students. It's something that happens very often. And now that I'm chair of the department, that's even more often than before, right?
I couldn't agree with that more, and I'm sure everybody else on the show would agree with that. Pete, Kenny, both of you guys have been heavily involved in different programs that help inspire and mentor the aspiring young aviation professionals. Either one of you want to speak to that as well?
Well,
go ahead, Kenny.
From a GAMA perspective, we in 2014, I put together, along with the head of Jepson at the time, Mark Van Tine, a program called the Aviation Design Challenge. And we go out to high schools across the country and have them virtually redesign an aircraft to do a specific mission, best fuel consumption, payload capacity, all that. And we vary that, and we work with a contractor called Fly to Learn to be able to adapt the software and keep improving it. And then we evaluate their designs and then pick a winning team to go out. And for the first 7 years, we built a Glass Air Sportsman in the 2-week to taxi program. In fact, GAMA has the very first one that was built. Mark Van Tine has the other one that was built along with it. So I'm going to be flying that next week, actually. And this year, we're going to take them out to Cub Crafters. The team that won is from the Rysbeck High School, which is right at Boeing Field, right next to Omar. And Boeing has been very involved in the development of that school. It's right near the museum there at Boeing Field. And so it's a fantastic program. And we track these kids through. A lot of them have gone into aerospace. In fact, one of them that was in our design challenge team just won a scholarship from GAMA, the Stimson Scholarship, to be able to continue their studies. But it's been a fantastic program, but it doesn't stop there. And I'm sure we're all familiar, former Congresswoman and Secretary of the Air Force, Heather Wilson, has got this commission that's working on women in aerospace, which, we as an industry have not done a good job of figuring out how all of this untapped potential that is out there, whether it's women or people of color in our society. There's a program from the University District of Columbia at Reagan National Airport where it's one of the best ATP programs in the nation, best graduation rates. So there's so many things that we as an industry can dig into to start getting young people to go and recapitalize our workforce, because we in current projections, Boeing does a good job of putting out the numbers. We need people to populate this aerospace industry, or we're going to be really hurting for labor. So I really appreciate what all my colleagues here on this show are doing, because anything we can do to get young people excited, and the earlier we start them, the better. High school is too late. We've got to be able to go and get them interested. And that's why some of these aviation schools are growing up in the middle school type of area. There's one at Centennial Airport that's being supported by many of the aerospace manufacturers. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to get to them early, especially when we're looking at minorities or women and everything. As Omar was talking about, to be able to create something, to be able to be there and do that, if we can get to them early before they're sucked off with, watching too much TV and seeing glamour jobs versus something that actually fulfills you and creating something, I think is really important to us.
Yeah, no, well said. And Kenny, I don't know how you have the time for it, but you managed to, outside of flying, instructing, raising 6 kids, et cetera, and continuing to grow your career in the Air Force. You also, on the side, do a lot with regard to inspiring young people. Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing and your take on that.
Absolutely. So I first of all, I can't agree more with what we've all said and with what you're doing, Vince. The importance of reaching out and the joy that we have within the aviation community, where we're all so philanthropic, really, of just willing to help. It's pretty unique, I think, amongst careers and opportunities in America. And so I've been passionate since really I was a teenager. I was a teenager and I was a flight instructor as a teenager at Civil Air Patrol encampment. So I was a part of Civil Air Patrol. I started flying through the Organization of Black Airline Pilots, now OBAP, and I went back and I was a teenager. I gave back there. I've always been passionate about ensuring that others have the opportunity to experience what is an awesome career and industry in any facet, not just in the air, but as an aviation lawyer, right? Aviation doctor. There are just so many things in our aviation community, aerospace community, that are accessible and meaningful and fulfilling. So in
Absolutely.
2012, I founded a nonprofit organization called the Legacy Flight Academy that aims to uphold and sustain the legacy of the heroic Tuskegee Airmen. And that is something that, again, transcends color, it transcends gender. It talks about what we have as Americans. And we were talking earlier before the show about how the Tuskegee Airmen, those incredible men and women, helped forge the Air Force, helped change literally the world by the courage and by the example and everything they did. So what we really have at LFA is a character development program that uses aviation. And absolutely, we want people in our industry, but we just want youth to know that they can achieve whatever they seek to do, that whatever their passion is, that they need to go for it and not be timid, and to realize that it will take hard work, but to realize that there's mentors, that there's people here that are able to help you. And so that's definitely, again, just been a passion of mine for as long as I can remember. And then I've been fortunate enough over the past several years for this to be kind of a primary effort of mine as I went into the Pentagon and the Air Force, and I stood up some of our efforts in the Air Force to increase our outreach. I created what's called the Air Force Recruiting Squadron and our Recruiting Service Detachment 1, whose mission is to inform, influence, and inspire, kind of focusing on that K-12, specifically that 6 through 12 age range, where we're offering, opportunities. And I'll go ahead and put a plug out for what they're doing. We created what's called the Aim High Flight Academy, where the Air Force is sponsoring opportunities for people to get their free private pilot's license, right? And the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated just stood up another program, and I have other friends in the Red Tail Scholarship Foundation and Sisters of the Skies. There's just so many, it's just such a vast array of opportunities. And my work for everyone who's listening, for everyone who will listen, is do it. Just try. There are so many people here that are willing to be your wingman, who are willing to help propel you in your career. So please just try, just reach out. I remember being a young kid before the internet and writing a letter to Estes and to Jefferson and saying, hey, my name is Kenny, I'm 10 and I want to be an astronaut. Can you help? And the amount of free stuff that I got from sending that letter, right? So just go and go for it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I won't even get into a story about me with Flying Magazine and the reader advertising thing in the back. And I ordered all of the brochures that came to the house. And back then it wasn't quite as sophisticated. So they sent you these really huge, really great brochures that I plastered some of them on the wall in my room and read them cover to cover. It could be about airplane tires or a tow bar. And I wanted to know all the details about it as much as I did about the airplane. So I get that totally. I'm going to put this out to everybody because one of the things So this show has been on the air almost a year now, and one of the things that we do is we cover a lot of what you guys have been talking about opportunities in the industry, both aviation and aerospace, or just overall. But we were talking about something earlier, and I've experienced it myself, and that is there are kids that are interested in the industry, and so yes, we want to guide them as to how they can further that interest and turn it into something. But there are also a lot of people that are either distracted by other things. And so I'm putting this out as a question from you guys about the fact that you can actually, and I've seen it happen over and over, you can raise kids in this industry and they not have an interest in it. And I think, Kenny, you touched on something I think is important, and that is to remind people that there are other things you can do. So if you're interested in aviation, you don't have to have a degree, an engineering degree, an aeronautical or aerospace engineering degree. You can specialize in something completely different. Dr. De Leon, we've talked about that. When you've had people, students that you've talked to your students about other things that can be done or that are needed. And we see it all the time, especially now with ramping up things in the aerospace side of things with these space flights and everything, that, you know, somebody may be a geologist or an archaeologist or just et cetera and so forth. I'll just put it out there and let you guys give your perspectives.
Yeah, I think that the interesting thing about space in particular is that it kind of encompasses, and you can see that in aviation as well, most of the disciplines of humankind. You will need absolutely everything. You'll need nutrition, and you'll need medicine, and you need psychology, and you need electrical engineering, and you need communications, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in the programs that we have here at the University of North Dakota in space studies, is a kind of a multidisciplinary program. So just a few years ago, we had a student who was graduated from journalism. And she said, well, you know, I really want to become a space journalist. And the only way for me to do it is to do a postgraduate degree and a graduate degree in space studies. So she did that and she went through it. And now she's a space journalist, for example, right? So you will need all different disciplines.
Great example, no bias, but great example.
so that's for example, and you know, we have people from medicine, MDs, that will take because they wanted to be more, they wanted to work for NASA or for the contractors in aerospace medicine. So you know, there are opportunities. You don't have to be an aerospace engineer or a pilot. There are plenty of opportunities, and I'm sure it happens the same with aviation, right?
Yeah. Pete, you've been in this industry a long time. Go ahead.
Yeah, Vince. So our intern, our Washington D.C. intern, is studying at Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania this year, and she's an economist, or wants to be an economist. And we hired her in our environmental branch to be able to look at the economic proposition of sustainable aviation fuel and how that translates. You know, because right now, obviously, there's more demand than supply. There's a huge study in just economics of being able to get the price point of that down. What kind of support structure, what kind of incentives can the government do to be able to drive up supply, to be able to reduce the cost, which will then help the entire aviation system. And I couldn't agree more. There, you know, whether it's in a poli-sci major that's working a lot of the issues that we do with the Congress or around the globe with politicians to be able to understand the value of aerospace. There are just so many opportunities, and yet also there's opportunities for people that aren't ready to go to college yet, that are technicians. We've got so many very, very good paying jobs, whether you're a mechanic out there or you're a technician working in one of our factories. And then the cool thing about aerospace is employers will then fund future follow-on education, and it comes out of the corporate dollars and not the individual dollars. So that's what we're also trying to get across, is that just join our industry. We will help you then get further on. And as we talked about earlier, people will mentor any young person coming into our industry because we want them, we need them, and we love them.
Yeah. Pete, GAMA is a really great organization that a lot of people don't necessarily know about in the industry. Can you tell us what the General Aviation Manufacturers Association is and what you guys do?
We represent over 100 international companies that build pretty much down to third-tier suppliers for all the airframe manufacturers, engine manufacturers, also large maintenance and overhaul companies. And so we have every member of GAMA is on the board, but we also have an associate membership that's formulated for the companies that are all exploring electric and hybrid propulsion. So that's got over 110 members just in that group that are looking at all aspects. And we work very closely with the U.S. Department of Defense on their Agility Prime program to be able to get, again, a stimulation of this new part of aviation that's coming on quickly. And we're getting more interested in hydrogen right now. So we've got a lot of companies that are exploring, especially hydrogen fuel cells and that capability. We've all, since we were watching the dawn of the Apollo program, we were hearing about hydrogen fuel cells and everything, but now they're becoming a reality. They're going to power vehicles that are flying. So all the big stuff that Omar is working on and our big airframe OEMs, this will all translate over time, and the environmental focus that we have in our country, and especially you see it in Europe right now, brings all kinds of opportunities for anyone that's interested in the environmental field to be able to join
sustainability, et cetera. Yeah. Pete, the other part I was going to ask you about it, and you just kind of touched on it a little bit. What's your take on urban mobility? I mean, that's the big term now that everybody is paying attention to, and there's a whole lot of development going on in that area.
A tremendous amount of investment in the area. And, as you know, Vince, over probably my whole time at GAMA now, 16 years, a lot of investment was coming from overseas into aerospace because there was a long return on investment. Now that's changing dramatically. People see the opportunity with advanced air mobility. And but also, if you look at what it can do for rural, and that we can put them in a pod, hit send, and the aircraft goes and flies into the vertiport at that burn center, we're going to save lives that way. So it'll benefit all of mankind. And there's so much activity, so much investment, and it's real. We will, I am very optimistic by 2024, we will see vehicles carrying passengers at the start of this new industry. And there'll be cargo aircraft out there that are flying, some autonomously, some manned, at least in the initial phases. So for all us pilots, you're looking at that, you're going, oh man, are we going to be needed out there? But we'll still be, I think as long as I'm around, we have a lot of need for men and women to be flying these machines.
Sure. Alexis, with what you've done all these years at Boeing and before that at the Kennedy Space Center, what's your take on people that you've seen in other aspects of the industry of what we're talking about, that there are so many other opportunities outside of just engineering?
Yeah, you need people from all types of different disciplines. My wife is an engineer, but she's a civil engineer, and now she's working airplanes. A lot of our engineers at Boeing start off as civil engineers, and outside of engineering, there's marketing that's needed. There's software. There's so many things you can do in the industry that sometimes we kind of just focus on the engineering aspect of it, but this is a huge industry with all different types of disciplines.
So, and you're in product development, so you have to collaborate probably with a lot of different disciplines in different areas at Boeing. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, pretty much in everything we do, it's thousands of people working collectively towards a common goal.
Yeah, exactly. Kenny, wanted to ask you. So recently, there's been a lot of, this has been off and on for the last couple of years, but very recently, you guys have somebody new in charge that's going to place a lot of emphasis on bringing more pilots into the fray. That's a big goal of the Air Force. Can you give us your perspective on that and what you're looking forward to seeing happen with that?
Absolutely. Like I said, I was fortunate enough to kind of work on that while I was in the Pentagon. And one of the things that we are all talking about is, again, just the opportunity and the collaboration that's required. One of the presentations I gave while I was at the Pentagon regarding this issue was at the National Training Aircraft Symposium at Embry-Riddle, and proposed what was called the 4 C's model of professional aviation development, and just saying that, hey, within our ecosystem, there's the institutions, the businesses, the organizations, right? And then there's the professionals that are a part of those businesses and institutions. And then there's the aspiring individuals, right? Our future workforce. And that, hey, the three of us are what make this ecosystem. So we've got to all work together to make sure that it is sustainable and promotable and continue to grow. And the way we can do that, as some of us have alluded to, is to make sure that it starts at an early age. And so dividing it over this kind of 4 C's model of childhood, then your college, then your cockpit, which was basically your initial training, and then your career, right? Kind of over that segment of time, literally from cradle to the cockpit, that, hey, if we all work together in a strategic and deliberate fashion, we can make some progress. And so on the governmental side, I'm excited to see how we will continue to have these public-private partnerships. Again, I work in the nonprofit sphere as well, right? And to look to see how we have corporate support to nonprofits, right? And again, we just are all working together. So there's opportunities, and what you're doing, right, even to bring about this collaboration, Vince, is really important. And so I'm hopeful, and there's definitely more work that needs to be done.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to have a little fun now. This is a Father's Day oriented show, and I've got to ask each one of you if you can share some story that's aviation or aerospace oriented that has to do with one of your kids. You know, something fun that is a very memorable event for you. Anybody can go.
I'll go ahead and start.
Okay.
Again, having wanted to be an astronaut originally, and it was about 4 years ago when we were at the Pentagon that the kids, my youngest son, or my oldest son specifically, right, started to show some interest. But I had my daughters. I was speaking at the National Air and Space Museum at Dulles, and was able to have some of my children meet then Colonel, but now, you know, Brigadier General Charles McGee, Lieutenant General Stacey Harris, the first African-American female pilot in the Air Force, not the second African-American female pilot, first African-American female general officer, to take pictures with them, to know them, to talk to Colonel Gregory, like I said, and then to go stand underneath the space shuttle. I forget which one. I think it's Discovery that's there at Dulles. But for my kids have so many memories now of them being involved in aviation. You see the picture behind me was from Korea, where my son was born in Korea, right? And he's got his little flight suit on. So I just have lots of memories now that are making my experience and my passion about aerospace and aviation even more significant, that my family and that my young kids are able to be a part of it. So it's
Sure.
quite exciting.
Yeah. Alexis, have you taken your daughter to Boeing yet?
I haven't had that opportunity yet. We haven't had a family day since the pandemic, but she's right. Aware. So her grandfather worked on the 747. Her mother worked on the 787, and I worked on the 777. So whenever she sees an airplane, she asks, "Is that Mama or Papa's airplane?" So she's already aware of it.
So she's already aware. Well, when we get past the pandemic, I'm sure that'll be fun for you to be able to do. Dr. De Leon, you shared with us a story before, but any other stories about your 11-year-old and aviation?
I remember a few years ago, I was testing a spacesuit at the Kennedy Space Center. There is a special chamber in a place called Swamp Works, where they have a lunar regolith bin. They have a simulant of lunar soil, and it's used for different tests. So we were testing a spacesuit, and I was inside I was a test subject that day. So NASA TV, the TV channel that owned by NASA, videotaping the test. And my daughter, who was at that time 6 or 7, was watching the video of me inside the suit doing some stuff. So when I came back home, she asked me, "Oh, Dad, but you're not going to space, right? You're not going to go on a rocket." And I told her, "Well, if they let me, I'll go." So she started crying like crazy, saying, no, don't you go to space, and leave us alone, et cetera, et cetera. So I had to convince her and say, "No, listen, I was joking. I was just testing the suit, but I'm not actually going on a rocket." So
that's priceless. I can actually see that scene. Yeah. Where was I gonna go? Anyhow, Pete, Pete. You've got tons of aviation background, so I can imagine you must have a story that would be fun for us to hear about.
Well, actually, the first story I thought about, you actually facilitated, and my one of my twin daughters, Kenny, was able to come with me to General McGee's 100th birthday party up at AOPA up in Frederick, and we're there, and it was a cold day, and all of a sudden, a Cirrus Vision jet comes taxiing up, and here's General McGee in the left seat, and his instructor is also a friend of mine. And I talked to Boney when General McGee got out. I said, "Well, how do you do?" And Boney said he flew the whole thing. I didn't touch the stick. He wouldn't let me touch the stick. And my daughter looked at me and said, "That's what you're going to be like, right?" I go, if I could only be as fortunate to live as long as General McGee. But then later on, during the formal party for him, Vince, you helped bring a young man up on stage that talked about what General McGee meant to all of us and service to our country and all the things that he had done for education. And my daughter was so moved, and then had a chance to talk with Ron, General McGee's son, who works for Boeing and has had a long career, Air Force and airline, then works for Boeing. So it was just one of those total happy, immersive aviation experiences that really made an impression upon her about what our heritage is like and the community that we have in aerospace. And I have to thank you, because it was all facilitated by you, and Megan still talks about that. So.
Well, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It was really a great experience overall. I was on the flight on the Cirrus Vision jet, and for him to be full control of the flight from taxi to takeoff to landing, and then land at Dover Air Force Base, and be greeted by the base commander as he taxis up in the plane. I mean, it doesn't really get much better than that, other than when he got out of the plane and there were all these airmen lined up to salute him and greet him, etc. So that was great, and just the whole experience. And then the next day he flew the M2 with Mark Baker, and Mark did the same thing. Mark let him taxi, take off, and land. And we're sitting there going, "This guy's 100. Wow." So, and the only reason he probably didn't fly last year was because of the pandemic. Otherwise, I probably would have seen him in something else again. But yeah, that was a great event, and it's really neat to hear that it made such an impression on your daughter, and I think on everybody. And the kid, Joshua Gibson, 12 years old, in middle school, who the funny story behind that is he wanted to come to the event, and his mom, being very strict, said, "Well, you have to get permission from the school to be absent." And so she told me that, and I said, "You know what? Why don't you have him write an essay and give it to whoever there?" So he wrote the essay, gave it to the principal, to his sixth grade administrator, and the counselor, and they were like, "Okay, done deal. Yes, you can go." And his mom read it to me over the phone. And I said, "Do you think he'd be interested in reading this in front of the general?" Because it was so well written. And first he said no, but he finally came around and did it. And since, we've seen him on video a couple of times. But yeah, that was a highlight of that event as well. So it was really
as great. I told you, Joshua has a guaranteed internship at GAMA when he's ready.
I remind his mom of that regularly. I'm like, The kid's got a job. He's got an internship and he's got a job, and he's not even in high school yet. I think he's getting ready to be a freshman in high school now. So, and by the way, he's a 4.0 student in middle school. So on top of everything else, now he's having trouble figuring out if he wants to be an aerospace engineer or something else in aviation. He's thinking about being a pilot, et cetera. So we know his future is bright. Who knows? He may be an astronaut and go to Mars.
I think we're going to be competing with Dr. Leone to get him to go to the academy versus UND. I think that's what's going to happen.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
It's funny you should say that, because he has been paying attention to UND as well. Yeah. So there you go. Well, guys, as we wrap up here, I just wanted to see if any of you want to make any comments about the future of the industry. And I'll start with you, Alexis. Having been in the industry now 17 years, and working on the kind of things that you do, what are you looking forward to in terms of the industry's future?
There's a lot of exciting changes coming down the pipeline, and we need these young folks to help push us further, right? Reach for the stars, as I say. There's a lot of interesting work coming down the pipeline, and they're going to be the ones that make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. De Leon, aerospace, space exploration, full throttle right now. You couldn't get any better.
Yes, I think we're living a kind of I call it a renaissance of space exploration right now, and I hope that this time it will be to stay. It will be driven by industry. So I think that the future is absolutely bright, really. I mean, I always mention to my students that, they normally get offers before the ink in their diplomas is dry. So it's an amazing time. And I want to say something else now that Omar is here. I want to thank publicly Boeing, because Boeing, I think he mentioned that briefly, Boeing is funding the graduate studies of his employees, of the employees. Several of Boeing full-time employees who are interested in doing a master's degree, they can fund it through Boeing, and that's really remarkable. That I'm sure it's not only Boeing, there are several companies that do that, but I want to especially mention that, because that allows to the students to be able to continue in their professional career while working full-time at Boeing. So I think that's absolutely great.
No, it really is. And that's great that you are bringing that up, which reminded me of something that Pete had talked about earlier in terms of the technicians and everything. So as I mentioned, I was at Embry-Riddle with the Aviation Maintenance Science Department, which was really a great experience to not only do the show from there, but to see what they teach and how they have it all laid out. But the thing that stuck with me was the chair of the department said, yeah, we can't keep the kids as soon as they graduate. As you said, the ink is still wet and they're getting offers. They're getting offers while they're juniors, it's like, well, when will you be done? So, right. And it's really, that's only going to increase. Because also, as Pete mentioned, and we were talking about, Boeing does a great survey, and the numbers on that survey are mind-blowing. I think it's about 6,000 pilots a year over the next 20 years or so, and somewhere in that same range for maintenance technicians, et cetera. And that's just those two areas. We're not talking about all of the other aspects that are needed in the industry. So point well taken. Lieutenant Colonel Kenyatta Ruffin, how about you? What's your take on the future with the Air Force?
Absolutely. So I definitely won't speak for the Air Force, but just speaking for all of us, right, as aerospace professionals, one of the things we say at Legacy Flight Academy for one of our programs is the sky's the limit until it's your point of view. And just, again, for you to have, for people, no matter if you're young or old, right, there are opportunities for you to be involved in our career. And so just get a taste. We all have talked about catching the aviation bug, right? Being bitten by aviation. And it really is true. The story that Mr. Bunce just shared about the community and how it affected his daughter, right? Just come take a look. Come actually experience what we do, more than just taking your picture or taking your ticket and, waiting for the seatbelt sign to be turned off. Go experience it a little bit more. Come out to the event later this month in Kansas City with General McGee. Just see what it's like, and you will be amazed at the opportunities there are for you, no matter where you are, no matter if you're 5 or 55, for you to be a part of this rewarding and fulfilling industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were saying, so besides the event there, later that weekend, there is a air show there in Kansas City, featuring, I believe, I want to say the Blue Angels, but it may be the Thunderbirds. Whatever the case, it's probably going to be a great air show, regardless of which group it is. Of course, Pete would like it, and you would like it to be the Thunderbirds. So, so let's hope I was right about that. No, but I think it's a really good point about coming to events. The biggest event that had to skip last year is Oshkosh, Air Venture at Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And that's an event of a lifetime for anybody to go to, any age, whether you're in the industry or not. It's one of those things you should do at least once. And if you do it once, you're probably going to come back every year after that. But another great event going on as well. And there are a lot of events that are starting to come back now that we're becoming post-pandemic. So that's going to be wonderful. Pete, I always like to say for the last person to take us home. So Pete, take us home.
Well, I think we've all talked about how excited we are about the opportunities. I mean, they are just expanding radically. The one note of caution that I would say out there right now that we as a community have to really work hard on is the environmental focus that's happening, particularly in Europe. There is a lot of vilification of aerospace at this time. And we account for a very small part of the carbon emissions into the atmosphere, but it's just like noise. If people see an airplane, they hear it, whether they can hear it or not. And we have to do a better story of telling about all of the great things that all of our collective parts of this industry are doing, using technology to be able to help to solve that problem. But we cannot constrain humankind. I mean, when you hear people say, why are we going back into space? Why are we going to go back to the moon? And why are we going to Mars? Or why do people need to fly? Well, if you artificially constrain humankind and what we can accomplish, it really hurts society as a whole. And so aerospace is such a driving force, and we have to do the right job of communicating to young people that we're contributing to society, that this mobility that we're providing and the opportunity that's there to become better environmental stewards and how we're all committed to it is so important to us. And so that's just my dose of reality there, that we have to all work together to be able to tell our aerospace story and what technology and what we're working on can do to help with environmental sustainability that we all care about.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you bring up, and it's a great reality factor. And the other reality factor is, now that we're getting post-pandemic, everybody's traveling, and they really appreciate the opportunity to be able to travel on these aircraft and all the mobility that aviation and aerospace offer. The other thing that aviation and aerospace has always done since as far back as we can remember is it's contributed to our technological advancement in society. So everything that is done in the military and done at Boeing and all of the other manufacturers, et cetera, and the power plant manufacturers and the Garmins of the world and Honeywell, all of those, that all contributes to technological advancement in our society. So it's a give and take. And then Pete, I appreciate you bringing it up. We have been more than out of time, but it's been such a great Father's Day show to talk with you guys. Pete Bunce, President and CEO of GAMA, the General Aviation Manufacturers Association. Dr. Pablo De Leon, Professor and Chair of the Department of Space Studies at the John D. Oligard School of Aerospace Sciences, as well as the director of my favorite, the Human Spaceflight Laboratory. I will be there at the University of North Dakota. And to your chagrin, Pete, I don't care if it's in the wintertime or not, just being in that laboratory is going to be a lot of fun to check out. So there. And then we have Omar Alexis Richards, who again is a structural design engineer for Boeing Commercial Airplanes product development at Boeing there in Seattle. And Kenyatta Ruffin, Lieutenant Colonel, commander of the 71st Operations Support Squadron at Vance Air Force Base in Enid, Oklahoma, and who may be coming back here to DC, but that's another conversation on another show. Anyhow, so again, guys, thank you very much for taking the time to be a part of the show today, and a very special show in dedication of us all being fathers, from the very young to the so-called grown. I always say so-called, because the kids they're going to call you at some point. We might as well tell you that, Alexis. They, even when they're 30 or 40 years old, you get the phone call, Dad, Mom. so be prepared for that. Guys, it's been great. Happy Father's Day to you all. And again, appreciate you being on the program.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Happy Father's Day to you too.
Thank
All
you.
right, thanks. I'm Vince Mickens with all things aviation and aerospace, and we'll